Hi everybody, my name is Anne. Thanks for joining me on Art on the Creek. We are in my home studio in Parker, Colorado, and I have a fun surprise for us to paint today. This is the Daniel Smith Colors of Inspiration set. I adore this set, and I realized I haven't used it in quite a while. I don't clean my palettes after I use them, but because I think I might be able to use that pigment again on my next painting. In this case, I use some of it, but not all, so we'll get to that. But the top row there is what you get. What comes with this set is the 12 pans, and they are beautiful together. They're wonderful for painting landscapes because you can have so much interest to them. If you paint botanicals, landscapes, cloudscapes, anything like that, that set is really wonderful. Now, this fine text set has iridescence and this color shifting one, and I think you can kind of see in the light there. At one angle it's kind of a seafoam green, and the other angle it's kind of a brick red, and it does have a sheen to it. So those fine tech paints are really fun. I might get those out and play with them, not sure. This is the back of a Fabriano pad, and on your art watercolor blocks or pads, I always save this chipboard on the back because they make the best art boards. What you can do ahead of time, I'm not going to do it here today, but you can take clear packing tape and go around that board. Just cover it with contact paper or packing tape so that you don't have any, so you give yourself a moisture barrier. And then you can really get your paper wet and go to town. But in this case, I'm not going to use that much water. We will use some, but not that much. So I'm just going to go ahead and tape the edges off with good old drafting tape. My mother was a draftsman, and she really encouraged in me my love for art. She taught me a lot of my very first art skills, and the tools and supplies that we used were drafting tools, and at the time dressmaking tools. Being a tall family, we made a lot of our own clothes, and we also were very creative. We loved to draw and paint. In fact, my mother was my first art teacher. She taught me how to sew, how to design dresses. These were things that she had done in her life, and for one of her careers, she was a dress designer, and then she became a draftsman. Married my dad, worked for the highway department, so she was always drawing, working on something. So all of these tools were always around the house. So drafting tape, really good, not nearly as expensive as washi tape, so I really like drafting tape. Another tool that I really like to use is this drafting pencil. I just love the weight of it. I don't think I've ever shared this one with you guys, but I use it often. It has a little dial on the top here, and I do not have my readers on when I'm showing you this. Maybe you guys can read it, but it switches from HB to fine to B, 2H, 4H, and a 2B. So it can accommodate many different widths of lead. You pull that silver cap off, and there's an eraser under there, and then you pull that out, and that's how you fill it. But I just love the weight of this pen. It's just really, I call it a pen, but a pencil that just really is so comfortable in your hand, and that grip is very comfortable to use as well. This is our reference photo right here. It's from Unsplash, the free reference photo site, one of them, and I certainly just thought it was a beautiful scene. So I'm just kind of drawing in, there's not a lot of drawing for this one, so this one's really nice. Just the curve of the snow and just kind of where those shadows kind of are. I'm not really trying to be real accurate, and I just want to remember that that swoop there is going to have these pine trees that are kind of coming up and toward the center. The way that this is laid out, of course, it has that kind of distorted view so that all those trees are kind of pointing up toward one point that's a perspective point that's off the page. So that's why this is so neat, is because these trunks will draw you in. So what I'm fiddling with here is more of this drafting tape, and I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. A little bit of it is off camera, but I am tearing the tape down the length of it, and I'm going to use this as masking for my tree trunks. The reason I wanted to tear it down the middle is so that I can create an uneven edge, kind of a deckled edge. That's going to be the vertical edge of the pine tree. And now I'm tearing just a little bit more off of there so that I can overlap that rough edge on the left side and have the smooth edge of the cut tape on down the center so that it won't show. So if that makes sense, I'm just tearing this tape to create deckled uneven edges, and I'm using that to build the masking for my tree trunks. So let's skip ahead to the end of that, and then I can show you what it looks like when it's all done. So here you can see I've kind of got just about got all of them on here, and I'm just really trying to press these down pretty good. I really want them to adhere pretty well because I'm going to be putting pretty much a lot of water on here. I'm just going over them with my finger just to make sure everything is tacked down really, really well. And I don't worry if the edges at the bottom are straight across, because we can certainly paint over that so that it looks more natural. But the tops, you might want to have them come to some kind of a tapered point or go completely off the page. So here we go. Our trees are all taped. If you don't have masking tape or any low-tack tape, you could certainly use masking fluid. If you do go that route and you do use masking fluid, make sure you read the directions, and definitely don't start painting until your masking fluid is completely dry. To get this wet to save time, I'm going to go ahead and just spray it with water and then take my 1.5 inch mottler brush and get that wet and just kind of spray that around. Now, in the interest of keeping all of these taped lines adhered to the paper, I want to primarily have those brush strokes vertical when I'm getting the water on here. I got a little bit too much water, so I'm just running a paper towel along the bottom and just want to let that pick up a little bit. That really wouldn't matter too much. You just want to make sure that, in this case, because we're going to have snow on the bottom and most of it will be white, but for the most part, just make sure that your water is distributed evenly and has a nice even sheen with no obvious puddles or drips along the edges. So now what we're going to do is to go in with some fun pigments. The paints I'm using today are from the Daniel Smith Colors of Inspiration set, plus a few others that I have from their Primatex series. And a lot of these paints are multi-pigments and they granulate so very well. Starting off with a quinacridone gold to capture that beautiful warm light that's coming through the forest. And keeping those the tapes down, those will be our trunks. So we're all set there. I'm just going in very loosely with many different kinds of greens that granulate and come apart into their individual pigmentation. And then I'm going to just tap in different layers of green. I'm also using shadow violet and a Mayan blue to pick up a lot of depth in the forest. Every once in a while I'll go in with a spray bottle and just kind of add more water. And here on the corners I'm adding a little more of those darker pigments just so that we can have some room for that. Now, since I put that Mayan blue up top, I want to go ahead and add that and use it down here at the bottom for the shadows of the snow. I really wanted to kind of turn the chroma up on this and make those shadows much more intense than what they are in our reference photo. In addition to the Mayan blue, I've dropped in some lavender in those blue shadowy areas just to kind of soften it up and really give it some more interest. I've also pulled that quinacridone gold ever so pale down into the snow. We don't want it to be yellow snow, certainly, but definitely some of that light could be reflecting off the snow. These salt crystals are really fun. I'll put a link to them if I can still find them. They're so large, and some of them actually are shaped like pyramids, and they really do have a fun effect. I like using them for backgrounds because the effect that they have is it's rather large. The salt, what it does when you put it on wet watercolor is water wants to go to salt. So it leaches into that salt crystal and leaves paths behind it. So you kind of end up with a starburst effect where the paint has been removed. And the hardest part of all with putting salt on your paintings is you have to wait. So I'm just going to give you a quick look here, see where we are and where it stands, and make sure you put the salt only up in the trees. You could put it in the snow, but in our case, we're only going to work with it in the trees. And you can kind of see here, now that I've let that sit for a long time, how the salt worked. Now, in order to take it off, we're going to use a rag or a paper towel, but I am going to do this over the trash can. So let me get that done. And as I was brushing it off, you can see some of the tape from the trees, some of our masking did come off. That's okay. Sometimes you really have to kind of put some pressure behind your salt removal. I do like to use a very soft towel, and that's why we need to let this dry for a really long time. We need to make sure that it is completely dry. Otherwise, you will smudge your watercolor. It's so frustrating, and it has happened to me more than once. Since I'm not using a heat tool to pull this tape off, I'm just going very slowly and trying to be as careful as possible. Starting from the bottom, going to the top, just because they are wider at the bottom, and it's easier for me to start that way. Once you're finished and you have all of the tape pulled away, this is what you will see. And let me pull it up closer to the camera so that you can see this beautiful granulation and pigment separation that's in these beautiful paints. The salt really helps accentuate the granulation, and the colors are just dancing on the page. I absolutely love this technique for backgrounds, and in this particular painting it just worked so beautifully. So we have these big white trunks. Well, it's time to fill them in and have this look a little bit more like a forest. Now, before you go in for this step, and this is all wet on dry right here, make sure that you have all of the salt off of your painting. Just pass your hand over it and make sure it doesn't feel gritty anywhere. And you can see I'm just using a light stroke to go up and down these trees, and I'm using a Piemontite Genuine. If you don't have that one, you could use burnt sienna, would be lovely, perhaps a burnt umber, in a fairly thin wash. I am trying to suggest that there's tree bark here, but I'm not really being too definitive about anything. I am trying to get as close to the edge on some of these trees that are on the sides, but in the center you'll notice that I'm leaving some white space, and that's because it's backlit right there and that light is coming through. So we'll deal with that as we go on, but you'll notice I'm leaving white space in the trunks. I'm not filling it in completely, and at some points I'm adding the roots of the trees down in those snowbanks. If this tutorial is going by just a little too quickly for you and you'd like to watch it more in real time, you'll be able to do that over on my membership platform. To learn more about the different kinds of memberships that I have with Art on the Creek, there's a join button if you're watching on a laptop or a desktop. There's a join button up under the video when you exit the full screen mode, and you can click that and learn more about the memberships with Art on the Creek. Or you can look down in the description of this video and you will be able to find a link that you can either copy and paste into your browser, or depending on which device you're using to view it, you can click on the hyperlink and go right to the description of learning more about memberships with my channel. Becoming a member of Art on the Creek will enable you to be a patron to my channel without having to go to another social platform. You're already right here on YouTube, so I figured we might as well spend the best of our time together. And if you are looking to really grow as an artist, have more one-on-one time, more full-length lessons, that's the place for you. Memberships are a month at a time, and you can cancel at any time. So please consider that if that is something that you're interested in. Now that we have our trunks done here, we can go ahead and come back in. Now this is wet onto dry, and just kind of very loosely paint in these pine boughs. We can start at the top and then come down in a slight triangle form so that they are conical in shape. We want to go ahead and layer the darks and lights of our greens so that we can give this forest depth and have it look so that it's not two-dimensional. And in order to do that, we want to make sure and leave a lot of space so that we can still see these trunks. And we want to use different greens, that purple and blue, the shadow violet, and the Mayan blue, so that we can really add some depth and dimension. And then the final step that we want to do is we want to go ahead and soften these edges. And how I'm doing that is I'm going in with a wet brush and just kind of adding little bits of that quinacridone gold where I think it needs it along the edges of the tree trunks, or sometimes I'm just going in with some water and just kind of smudging that edge a little bit just to get it to be soft so that I don't have that white border. I don't want it to look like cut and paste, and that's something that you can really risk if you're using some kind of masking fluid. Let me just go in here and add a little bit of dark areas. I'm using again that Piemontite Genuine, or this would be your burnt umber, your burnt sienna, to just kind of fill in some areas on the tree trunks where I think they are just a little too stark white on the edges. Now you want to make sure, and at the two trees in the center, make sure that that lighter portion of your tree trunks is on the edges so that you can see that sun coming around. And now we'll go ahead and add some of these roots coming down into the snow. And I'm really just kind of freestyling this. I'm just kind of thinking, well, I guess if I were a tree trunk, that would be a good place for me to grow a root. Now, since we've made our shadows a little more intense than what is in the picture, of course, our snow drifts look a little bit different. But that's your artist's license, and that's a wonderful thing to use when you're painting. There's no rule anywhere that says you have to paint something exactly like the image that you're using for a reference, or anything that you're using out in the real world. If you're painting en plein air, you can change the color of whatever you see. You can change the temperature by using purple instead of using blue for a shadow, things like that. There are so many things you can do to really make the art yours and to really personalize it. I'm using a heat tool to remove the tape, and you'll notice I'm kind of pulling it off at a 90-degree angle, and I'm going very slowly, but that heat is really helping to release that adhesive. Even though it's a low-tack tape, I really like to use a heat tool to just kind of get that to cooperate and come off of there just a little bit. I really like the bold colors in this. I like how it turned out. And instead of using the Fine Tech watercolors, instead of using these, I think what I'm going to use, I have this Wink of Stella pen. I don't know if you've ever heard of these. I know that card makers are pretty familiar with them, and I hope I can still find them. If I can, I will definitely link to it. It is a brush pen with a big cartridge on the inside, and it's got a little bead in there so that it can keep the mica in here moving. It's just a beautiful, mesmerizing glitter pen, and it just paints out this beautiful water-based formula that is a nice, sparkly, glittery mica. I would say that it has a silver tinge to it. It could be opalescent. I don't know what color I'd really call it. It's just the neatest stuff. And if I can find one, I will definitely put a link to it because it is just so fun to use. You just squeeze it and a little bit comes out, and you're just using it like a water brush. And you can see you can tap it around there. Kind of a big blob came out right there, but you can just pick it up and move it elsewhere on your painting. So I really like the Wink of Stella. I think it's just a fun way to add just a little bit of sparkle, and I'm just putting it in the snow here. And really, it's just the right amount. Mica paints will do the same thing, any of your iridescent or pearlescent paints. But this Wink of Stella I thought would be fun and just a little something different. And we'll give that another shot with the heat tool. And my friends, we are finished. I'm just going to add my signature and a date here, and I'm just using a pencil. That's fine. Not really sure where this is going to end up yet, but that's what I'm doing. And I recommend that you always sign and date your work. There you can see a little bit of that sparkle in that Wink of Stella. It's very, very subtle. If you do use this to make prints from, the Wink of Stella will not show up in the print. So you would be better off using that as an after adornment. If you're making a bunch of cards, you can paint that on the cards after they're printed. Happy December, you guys. I hope that wherever you are, you might be able to hear the sound of snow crunching. And if you are on the opposite end of the world, have fun at the beach in Australia. I hope you guys are getting a good amount of sun and really enjoying your winter. Happy holiday month. We'll talk to you soon, guys. Have a great week. Bye now.